Welcome to ELK Stack tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to learn about how do we monitor the log messages coming from multiple services in microservices world. This ELK Stack has become more popular. It is open source and it is a combination of three open source tools: Elasticsearch, Logstash and Kibana. With the combination of these three tools, we can configure number of microservices applications so that at centralized location we can monitor the logs coming from all the services. And out of which all these three are open source. You can just go to this URL and you can start downloading with all these tools. All are open source. You can download all the zip files. You can start based on your platforms, like you can download the first Elasticsearch, then you also find in the same URL Kibana and as well as Logstash. These three zip files you guys can download. So it is available in my machine, already downloaded. The first zip file is going to be Elasticsearch, next is Logstash, and then you need to download with the Kibana, which is a visualizing tool. These three has to be downloaded, and here the first is Elasticsearch is it's a storage for all your logs. It is a NoSQL database where it is internally is going to store your log messages. So before the logs are getting stored into Elasticsearch, in between we will be using a pipeline which is a Logstash. It is going to configure to your application where you are going to generate your log messages. So it will pull all the log messages from the application based on the configuration you provided in your logger, and then it is going to send those log messages into your Elasticsearch. In between, any filtering processing has to be done. We can do it in a Logstash. Then Kibana is a visualizing tool where we can monitor with all log messages by means of searching and by means of text search and as well as by means of some graph. We can monitor all types of logs. So the first one is here. The application should be configured with the loggers so that the logs are generated by your any one of your application. So let's take an example where we have created with one simple Spring Boot application, and we have a controller where we created with a logger. This logger is going to generate your log messages. A simple info messages here will be recorded into your logger. So logger is configured into your file. You can see here we are just configuring with a folder ELK where we are recording into this file. This is how the application is configured for logger. So now this is a Logstash is going to pull the messages from your application generated by your loggers, and it is going to process those messages and it get stored into your Elasticsearch. So this is the storage for your log messages. Once the messages are stored here, so it can be configured for visualization with Kibana. So that is how we are going to make use of these three tools: Elasticsearch, Logstash and Kibana. Out of which first you need to start with your Elasticsearch. It is going to create with a cluster and which is available for you so that to store your log messages. So when you extract this Elasticsearch, go to your configuration where you will find YAML file. So in the Elasticsearch YAML file, you can see the configurations required for your Elasticsearch engine. So here it will be provided with the path of your application and also where the logs needs to be created, and also network host property and the default port number in which your Elasticsearch is going to run. So this is all is available in this config file. And next is you need to start with the Elasticsearch. So you go to bin and here you just need to start with your Elasticsearch. So here you can start with your batch file so that your cluster will get started with. So it takes few seconds. So just by the time your Elastic search engine is going to start with your cluster, so let's look into the next config file. So this is what is the Elasticsearch we are going to start with. This is basically it's a NoSQL database where the database is going to make use of Lucent search engine to process with log messages. And it is an open source and it can be managed with an indexes provided, and it provides with a full text search, and as well as it provides with the replication, sharding, and it can store the log messages into JSON format. So it supports with the geolocation and as well as multi-language support. And this is what is the Elasticsearch we are going to use to collect all the messages, log messages coming from various applications. So before we store into this Elasticsearch, we are going to configure with Logstash. So this is again an open source tool. It is to collect the messages coming from your application, and where here we need to configure with a log conf file, and in which we provide the path of the log messages coming from our application. So wherever we configure our config file, we need to configure with our Logstash. Now if you go with the Logstash folder, where you find in config folder, there is a Logstash config file you need to create with. So this is a configuration file. Will have the three stages for your application. One is input, where from it is going to pick your log messages, and the pattern into which it is going to create, and the filter mechanism. If you wanted to filter any of the messages, you can make use of a grok tool here to match the specific condition, and based on that you can filter the messages. And then finally, where it has to give your log messages. So it has to give to your Elasticsearch server. So that is the URL you will connect through, so that the messages coming in from your application from this location, it is going to be given to your Elasticsearch. So this path has to match, and this is the port where our Elasticsearch is going to run. This much of configuration you need to do in the Logstash. And now once this configuration is done, go to your bin folder of your Logstash, open a new command prompt, and here, before that, let us check whether our Elasticsearch is getting started. Yes, it is started with. So now here in the Logstash, after we configure that Logstash config file, we need to run with a command. So this is the steps explained in this document. So in the second step, first the Logstash file has been created already, and we created, this is the configuration in that file, and you need to run this command. Logstash -f and your config file name. So go to your Logstash path and you give this command. So that now it is going to start with running your Logstash. Before this Logstash is going to start with, make sure that your cluster is on. So if the cluster is on, now as the cluster default port, it is running with the port number 9200. So that is the reason we need to open with this port to check with our cluster readiness. So this is our Elasticsearch cluster node. So based on your cluster status, now it is going to give you the status of your cluster node and its support. So this is what is your Elasticsearch. Cluster is cluster name, and then the cluster number, and what is the compatibility it is providing with. So this is about your cluster, and then we are going to start with our Logstash. And now we need to check with our application where it has to produce our log messages. So it's a simple application where we are going to generate with a simple welcome message with the endpoint called ELK. So let's start our application. Let's run it, and it is going to run. So on the port 8090. Just to generate our log messages, like we are running our application, our port is, our endpoint is ELK. It's a simple welcome message. So this is a message we are displaying at the browser. At the same time, we are also recording into our logger. So this is what is a logger we create, and where we are also writing into our log file. So let's get checked with our local log file created. So E, and then your folder is ELK, and where we just created with our the file what we configured with. So the configured name is elk_new.log, right? So in a similar fashion, like in your, you need to check with the where you created your Logstash. Within with this Logstash, in your log config file, in the config file, you need to check with the file name. So that is should match, right? So now that is what we are going to record here. Let's check with that file. So this is what is a file log get created, and we can see. So here is, you can see, so this is a log get created here. So on today's date with the today's timestamp. Now this is a log get created. The same log messages we must be able to monitor at one common location, at a centralized location we would like to see. So that is the centralized visualization tool we are going to configure called Kibana. So where, let's go here and check with our, so now this is what is our Kibana tool where we have downloaded, and here is, now you just go to your bin path, and then you can start with the Kibana batch file. Before you start with, you can just keep monitoring your Elasticsearch console, and also you can search with your Logstash console. Logstash has started, okay, reading your log messages. So as your application is getting hit here, whenever you hit your URL at the browser, okay, and if even if multiple endpoints are there, you can try to hit so that it has to generate such log messages. That log messages we must able to observe here in the Logstash console. Now we are going to start with our Kibana. So where we just run with kibana.batch file. Now this is going to start your Kibana visualization tool where the default port number is 5601. You just open the tool where we can monitor the log messages coming from the services. So here we are configuring with one single application, but it could be multiple services running with, and we can configure all these services, and so that the log messages coming from various services can be at the central location at your Kibana UI console, you can monitor. So by the time the Kibana is started, we need to open 5601 port. This is the default port number. It takes some time. By the time Kibana is ready, your UI console get opened here and where we can monitor. So in this Kibana console, like we need to create our index pattern for our application. So what is the index pattern? This is to identify the messages coming from your application. So where in Logstash config file what you have written, based on this config file, so here you have written your configuration. So this is a file you have written. So based on this configuration, you can give your pattern where the timestamp pattern you can create on your Kibana console. So based on this pattern, you are going to match your messages coming in. Still it is taking time. Let's wait. So here the thing is, we have an alternate tool for our centralized log monitoring called as Splunk. And if you compare with the Splunk, the major differences is Kibana is slow. And then here it is open source, but the thing is, the problem with this Kibana is, if you can compare here, so Kibana is open source and it is not supporting with the Solaris portability. Like if you wanted to work on Solaris platforms, like this tool is not going to support. Whereas Splunk is a commercial tool, it's a proprietary tool, most of the clients to prefer to use, but which is not a open source. It's a paid version, and you can make use of Splunk or ELK stack for log monitoring your microservices based applications. And coming to the performance wise, if you can compare with the speed, so Splunk would be much faster than ELK stack. So this is the differences you can observe. And a log analysis can be done in ELK stack in various formats like free text search we can do, field level search we can do, and the logical statements we can search with, proximity searches. And to perform this search process in Kibana dashboard, we will create with a pattern called as index pattern. So we will create with an index pattern. Based on the pattern, we can search with. That is a pattern we configure in our Logstash file. So based on the pattern, we can configure it. Any kind of filtering needs to be done. Here you need to write your filter messages. And to once this filtering process is completed with your pipeline using Logstash, you will be giving your log messages into your Elasticsearch. So here you can see. So in the Logstash pipeline, once the logs are pulled from your application, so into your Logstash pipeline as an input, it will make a filter conditions based on the conditions applied on your log messages. Finally, it is going to send those log messages back to your Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch is a storage area where it can record with all your messages. And finally, our Kibana tool is going to, so the Kibana is going to provide us the visualization. So in this visualization, just we can log monitor all the messages based on the given search conditions. So this is the three tools we are going to make use of this ELK stack: Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Now our Logstash is getting started and Kibana is now available. You can see this is the Logstash. Now you can open 5601 default port of Kibana. This is a dashboard of Kibana where we can log monitor at a centralized location for multiple services. So instead of we check with the loggers for each and every application differently, like a different log file, like we can have this kind of dashboard. We can find the aggregate log messages for multiple services. So here is first you can go and search for, here also you can search for your menu. So first of all you need to go with the index management. You need to create this Kibana index management. So if you go to the index pattern and you just create an index pattern. So as we have already the index pattern called Logstash, we wanted to create with this is the index. Now if we can go here, so this is a Logstash which is already created at so and so timestamp, and it will be showing health of your application and how many number of replicas you are going to use, what is the storage you are using for this particular Logstash, it is showing here. So index templates, data streams, and then component templates for your particular indexed. And whenever you wanted to create with a new index, you can go here, index pattern management, go for create new index pattern. And in this index pattern, you can give the pattern like log dash hyphen the URL. So which is already existing. Suppose if you wanted to make use of the same index, so this is the index pattern already available, which is already created. You just open it. And now this is the pattern where we created to monitor our log messages coming out of our application. So here you just now go for discover. Whenever you discover, now you are able to pull all the log messages coming in from your application. So you can search for Logstash and give the time for now it is going to pull the messages which are coming for last 15 weeks of duration. Now this is all the log messages for a given application. What is the message it is going to, and what is the file you have executed, and all the log messages you can pull over here. So based on the hit you do and based on the log message is generated by your application on the dashboard, you can monitor and also you can visualize. So various parameters, based on the various parameters you can generate the graph and you can monitor your log messages in